So there's a lot of really dope things bubbling up in book communities. And I also think with the banning of books, that's gotten so it's gotten to the point now where you have librarians getting arrested, losing their jobs. Like book banning has become the go-to. And I'm grateful to be in New York City because even though we do have that issue, it's less of an issue here.
Mm.
But I think in a lot of other states, Texas, Florida, right? Like it's insane. So people are really starting to raise their awareness and their consciousness around like, why are books being banned? And why are only books that censor marginalized experiences being targeted? And so I think there is like this way that there's this wave of awareness that's been happening, especially for the younger generation around like, no, we're not, this can't continue and we're going to fight back. And so people are really like becoming aware, becoming activated, and becoming readers. And I love that.
Yeah.
Real quick.
Amazing.
All
Yeah.
about all about free speech in America. All about free speech until the white people got to read it. You know, then it's
Yeah. Throughout all the
There you go.
history of time, it's never been a good sign when they start burning or banning books. It's never a good sign.
Never.
I'm just like,
History repeats itself, right?
you
We're the
know,
last people to do that. I don't know.
man,
Oh,
you know, God forbid we got some books in there that talk about different things or different identities or different stories.
Yeah.
Jesus. It sucks that people are going through that. I also wanted to mention, right, and I'm not going to overgeneralize, but I'm going to do a little. You got a lot of folks that are on the spectrum that are these librarians too. And a lot of them are kicking ass and doing their thing. And we're like, no, this is bullshit because things might be a little black and white for us. But like, no. So some of those folks getting arrested, getting in trouble, right? They're sticking by their morals, values, and ethics as a human, as a person, but also as a librarian. The thing that they're supposed to do is to teach these kids. So shout out to all of them and sticking to their morals, to whatever state you're in. Some of these states like Florida, Indiana, Texas. I know in Indiana we've banned a lot of books recently. So shout out to all y'all doing your thing. And thank you for mentioning that audiobooks are books because there's people engaging and reading with these things in different ways. And right, even with me, reading that book as ADHD and dyslexia is tough. But I can get through it. It just takes me a minute and then I get into the groove, but it takes me a minute. So the audiobooks, I know a lot of my clients love them. And the neurochemistry and the things that are firing the dopamine, the serotonin, right? You're talking about massive engagement, right. Talking about healing and wellness. Also some introspection and right, some identifying things is going on. But to me, it's just the neurochemical processing that's going on and making them feel better. So continue to read, continue to listen, continue to watch.
Thank you for saying that because Susan Elderkin is married. She's a bibliotherapist and an author from the UK. Her husband is a neuroscientist. And she had him conduct a study on her while she was reading because she thought while I'm reading, my body must be super calm. And she found the opposite, that when she's reading, there were all these, everything was just sort of like activated. And the research that her husband pretty much concluded was that when we're reading, we're actually being transported, physically being transported. Our nervous system experiences what we're reading as if we're actually living the book. And I thought that that was so neat because I spend a lot of time asking my clients these kinds of questions like, are you a visual reader? Are you a kinesthetic reader? How do we interact and engage with text in a way that is therapeutic for us? Because a lot of times we just read, we're not thinking about these things consciously. But even for some of us who are visual, like I prefer to read a book than to watch a TV show because I like the fact that it plays out in my mind the way that I want to see it, right? I value movies and TV shows, but the way that my mind works, I'm extremely visual. So even asking, and my therapist is also someone who specializes in bibliotherapy. I've been working with her for 10 years. She was the first person to ask me, when you're reading, let's talk about what you see. Do you see the pictures in color or in black and white? I had never thought about that before. I see everything in color. And so even just thinking now, after working with her, as I'm reading, is it neon color? Is it bland? Is it matte? Like, why do I see certain tones in certain ways based on how I'm engaging with the text or based on the emotion that the text is eliciting in me, right? Like, these are all very specific to who we are, our life story, the archetypal things that arise for us while we're engaging with stories. And so it's all very fascinating. Neuroscience is at the heart of this, absolutely.
It is. For me, it's it's not, I just don't just see the images. It's like I completely dissociate and then I'm transported into it. So I'm actually watching it inside the movies. I'm actually in it. And when I'm doing therapy, I'm actually in their story. I'm looking at them, but when I look away, like I'm in the story. So when they get into their experiences, I really know and I can feel what's going on because now I'm experiencing it myself, which to me is magnificent, being deeply empathetic and having this visual mind, this autistic mind, until it gets into the trauma stories. And then it gets a little weird for me.
Yeah.
But that's my thing is, and I didn't even know this was a thing. And then I saw this movie. This is going to sound super weird. This show. It's the first time I saw a character. I'm like, he acts like me. It's the autistic detective in the TV series Hannibal.
Oh my God.
Wow. I didn't know that he was autistic.
Oh, he's definitely autistic as hell, but not, so I'm not Hannibal. Even though I like Hannibal in that show, because
sure, buddy. Sure.
Hannibal in that show is so attractive in that show. Oh my God.
Would you like some Chianti?
But still, the way he visualizes things and then puts it together, it's like all these other shows, The Mentalist and all that, they're all visualizing. Besides the point. That's when I first realized that.
I love The Mentalist.
Yeah. That's when you realize that you are like someone else. I'll kick it back to Spence. What else you got for the boss?
Yeah, I'm curious to what does a session look like for you when you do your bibliotherapy? Because is it more of like a group situation? Can you do one-on-ones? I'm kind of curious what it kind of looks like for somebody kind of either just starting or somebody just, as you're already working clients.
Yeah, that's a great question. So bibliotherapy could be prescriptive or interactive, and therapists use bibliotherapy in this way all the time. And maybe, they're not calling it that, but that's what it is. So a therapist might recommend a book to a client, and that would be prescriptive, right? Your therapist is saying, hey, I think you'd really enjoy this book, or I think this book might provide more insight or guidance, and you can choose whether or not you want to read the book your therapist recommends. And then there's interactive bibliotherapy, which is actually reading the book together in the session. And that could be really valuable. So I counsel a lot of readers, like people who are voracious readers, who are reading all the time. Their books come up in session all the time, just through regular talk therapy. And I'll say, hey, why don't bring the book and let's talk about it. Or if there's a scene that really activated a client, let's read the scene together and see how we can incorporate this into our work to help you make some meaningful connections. Because I believe that whenever there's an emotion elicited, there's something underneath it that we can use. And so that's really what that looks like with my traditional therapy, like talk therapy clients. These are people I've been working with for 5+ years. Sometimes we use books, we incorporate writing poetry or reading it into therapy. Sometimes we don't, right? Depending on the modality that works best for them and what they need. And then there's clients who only book me for bibliotherapy. So if you go to my website, you can book me at any time for a virtual 50-minute bibliotherapy session. Upon booking, you're going to get a reading intake that I'm going to ask you to fill out. I'm going to ask you, why you booked me, a bunch of questions about you as a reader. What do you like to read and why? And then what are some themes coming up in your life? Once I read your intake, I'm going to do what a tarot card reader does. It's kind of like divination, but I do literature divination. So I'm going to bring it to my altar and I'm going to start pulling from literature based on what you shared with me about you as a reader. So let's say your favorite book back in the day in high school was Catcher in the Rye. You're telling me a little bit about yourself. If Catcher in the Rye was your favorite book in high school, I can kind of like glean some things about who you were in high school, right? And so based on that intake, I'm going to pull some literature and then I'm going to curate a PowerPoint presentation of 10 slides. And then I'm going to use that PowerPoint presentation to facilitate a therapeutic discussion with you that I call a bibliotherapy session. And what's really fascinating about this, and I didn't realize until I started marketing my services how spiritual my approach is, because there are bibliotherapists that just say, hey, you need books to process depression, here's a list. You need books to process, a life transition, here are some books. I don't work that way. I'm very much like, my reading intake is the heart of my work because I really want to understand who you are today
Yeah.
and what question you're sitting with in this moment. Because I believe that the right book at the right time is the medicine, right? If you're a reader, you're reading anyway, whether you come to see me as a therapist or not. So I really want to make it meaningful. And I've had clients during our bibliotherapy sessions that I've never met a day in my life. But during or after my session, they're in tears because they're like, oh my God, Emily, you pulled so much literature
Yeah.
around parent loss. How did you know I lost my mother last month? And I'll be like, whoa, I didn't know that. But I'll explain to them how, based on your intake and based on you as a reader, I'll take your intake to my altar, I'll say a little prayer, and then I'll just start pulling from literature. And it's always really eye-opening to me when people are like, whoa, like this really resonated. Because I deeply believe, I'm not religious at all, but I'm deeply spiritual. I
Yeah.
was raised by my grandmother, went to church with her 6 days a week, right? Like so much of
6
my
days.
spiritual journey as an adult now has been reclaiming ancestral ways of engaging with text, with bibliomancy, with just divination and the medicine that we have as African American, Puerto Ricans, just people of the diaspora. And I see this like play out in my work all the time, and it's really meaningful and beautiful.
There you
So,
go.
and it doesn't always happen, but when it does, I'm like, okay, we're onto something here. So I'm excited about my book because I feel like I get asked a lot this question about like, how do I do what I do?
Mhm.
And I'm just, now I can just say, read my book.